Good morning. You're listening to the BLAINESWORLD show here on WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina, 103.7 on your dial. This is, as indicated, the BLAINESWORLD show, and we're heard each Wednesday at 9 a.m. And you can also watch us on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. And each week we focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first guest, and he is Dr. Michael Wiseman, who's heads up a practice in Asheville called Our Family Doctor. And welcome aboard, Mike.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And what you can do, Dr. Weizman, you can also wave to all your fans and friends who are watching on Facebook. So if anybody's watching, you're actually seeing Dr. Weizman. This is exciting. This is the first time you've ever been on Facebook Live?
That's right.
Okay, so I'll treat you gently, I promise.
Appreciate it.
Michael Wiseman is a family physician and co-owner of a family doctor, an independent private practice here in Asheville. After graduating from Temple University Medical School and completing a 3-year family medicine residency just outside of Seattle, Dr. Wiseman and his family moved to Asheville, North Carolina some 20 years ago. He has 2 teenage daughters, enjoys hiking, biking, cooking, reading, and travel, and also taking care of me, Dr. Wiseman. I appreciate the fact that I'll give a plug here, even though you didn't ask me to, but Dr. Wiseman has been my physician since I moved to Asheville some 12 years ago. And not only do I appreciate all that you've done for me and Cynthia as well, but I should mention that others do it in Asheville as well, as evidenced by the fact that you won, I guess, this past year, the best medical practice in Western North Carolina. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the Mountain Express Best of contest.
That's fun. Pretty cool. And you've won before, is that correct?
Yeah. We've won quite a few times, and it's always an honor, and we always appreciate it, and we like to support the newspaper as well.
Okay, well, it's not only an honor for the practice, but I should mention that Dr. Wiseman was voted, I think, this year the second top most popular, whatever they call a physician in Western North Carolina, and 2 of your other doctors got recognized as well.
Yeah, it was fun. It was the first time we had a clean sweep of the 1, 2, and 3 slots. Dr. Polanski, myself, and Dr. Preston. So felt really good to be recognized.
Okay, that's pretty impressive. And again, I was very pleased that you did get in that ranking. Dr. Wiseman, the question I always ask when I meet somebody for the first time is, first of all, you grew up where as a kid?
I started out growing up in Detroit, Michigan, and then we moved to Central Florida when I was about 12. And so middle high school was in outside of Orlando.
By the way, I had that shift also. Was that tough for you as a kid, shifting from one area at 12 years old to another area?
It was incredibly tough. It was a tough age to move and leave your friends behind and start over. But kids are pretty resilient, as I tell parents all the time, and I got through it.
Because I remember I moved right around that age at 12, but at that age, I didn't want to become a doctor. When did you decide you want to become a doctor?
It's kind of funny. I'm sort of atypical in that regard. I kind of started wanting to be a doctor when I was about 6. There were no doctors in my family, but my best friend at the time, his dad was a doc, and I was drawn to it. And I knew then that that's what I wanted to do. So
when did you start? From a studying standpoint, I guess, in undergraduate?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was pre-med in college, but it's worth sharing a funny story. When I was a senior in high school, I did an internship with an orthopedic surgeon just to kind of get my feet wet. And the first day he brought me into the operating room, I'm in scrubs, the whole gear. He says, "Hey, Mike, come over here, take a look at some anatomy." And he opens up this guy's knee, and I totally hit the floor. I faint, I'm out cold. And I come to, there's all these nurses around me with smelling salts reviving me. And one of them whispers in my ear and says, "Mike, just go to law school."
I can't believe that story, because
to
your credit, to your practice's credit, as you know, I used to have trouble, with giving even blood. And somehow now it's become easier for me, but I don't think as a result, I'd ever want to become a doctor,
Yeah.
So after that, did that cure you of your
no? I mean, I had to kind of sort of learn how to sort of stand the sight of blood, if you will. So each day I would get a little closer, and after a week, I was able to assist or watch in surgery, and then once I got to medical school, it wasn't a problem. It was just that initial shock of seeing somebody's knee cut open, and and it's no surprise that I'm not a surgeon. So,
Well, no, I never heard that story. But talk a little bit about then, Dr. Weizman, what you are, so that you did your residency, the whole bit, then you moved to Asheville. That was, you said, 20 years ago.
yeah,
When you first came, did you know you wanted to open your own practice, or did you?
yeah. So after I completed 3 years of family practice training out near Seattle, I did a year of what's called locum tenens work while my wife was finishing up her residency, and that allowed me to work in all kinds of different practices, hospital owned, private, rural, urban, et cetera. And what I learned from that year of bopping around doing different things was that I never wanted to work for a hospital system. I wanted to have a private practice. It just suited my control freak personality. And so I've never really looked back. It's been 20 years of private practice.
In the 20 years, were they all in Asheville?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's quite a move. So when you moved to Asheville, that's when you opened up a practice?
Well, I joined a practice 20 years ago. And then about 10 years ago, kind of started my own practice with my business partner, Dr. Emeritus Polanski.
Okay. And that was quite a move, in terms of having, I guess, not necessarily having a business background, but having worked in a practice and all of a sudden start a practice with the two of you. Was that difficult at the time?
I mean, it was, transitions are tough and risky, and, taking out loans and this and that. So yeah, but, I was inspired. I'd read a couple of business books, and I was kind of motivated to make it happen. And we hired a great manager. We had a great team of docs. We hired great staff, and it's worked out really well.
Talk about that, what you just mentioned in terms of hiring great staff. Is that becoming increasingly hard now for any practice to hire the staff?
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult before the pandemic, but with the pandemic, it's difficult. I mean, as you know, there's a labor shortage across all industries, certainly in healthcare. So I think particularly private practices have to be creative and in their benefits packages, and how they pay people, and to attract and retain folks. So yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge, but I'm really grateful that we have had a solid staff for a while now. We don't have very great turnover, so I think we're in a great spot.
Well, even something you did too impressed me the other day. I was in the office for a flu shot, and I actually didn't come into the office and explain what you did on that, but I thought it was really done well. If people wanted to get a flu shot.
Sure. Well, this is something we started last year. We have a drive-through Saturday morning flu clinic, and we have everybody kind of sign up for a specific appointment time, but multiple people per time, and folks just kind of drive through in their car, and our lead clinical medical assistant comes out and gives the flu shot, and our practice manager is managing the administrative end, and it's very quick and seamless. Nobody has to get out of their car, and patients love it. And I think even when this pandemic gets tamped down, I think we'll continue this, because it's just such a great thing. And Blaine, let me just say that one of the nice things about having a small private practice is we can innovate, we can be creative. We don't have to run an idea up the chain through a committee. We can just say, hey, why don't we do this? And if it doesn't work, then we won't do it again. And things can happen pretty quickly.
One of the cool things about that was just what you said. I had my appointment, and I thought I'd have to come in there. I'd be early. I'd be waiting 10, 15 minutes. And boy, and then I was a little disappointed. I was 10th in line or something. I thought I was going to be there all morning. And I was out of there within 7 minutes. It was so impressive, just to go through. A great way to offer, something as simple as a flu shot.
Sure.
The other thing I think you folks are very innovative on, and hopefully you'll be starting it again, is that one of the things I love about your practice is that obviously you take appointments, but you used to have what you call drop-in hours, or was it on Saturdays?
Yeah, so right now, well, because of the pandemic and screening and staffing and everything else, we haven't been able to do our drop-in clinics. Again, the hope is to bring that back. But one thing we do have that is something that we've held strong to from day one is each doctor, we have 4 doctors working each day. Each doctor starts his or her day with 5 to 6 same-day appointments that can't be filled until the day of. So if somebody is sick, they call in, there's an appointment for them. They're going to get seen that day. We're really big on patient access, whether it's through same-day appointments or through, portal email messaging with the doc directly. It's really important for our practice to maintain that. The patients feel that connection and that access, and they really appreciate it.
And like you said, it is appreciated because I've never had to wait, but obviously if I make an appointment in advance, it's not a problem and it's not an emergency. But the couple of times I've had emergencies, it's a pleasure that I've been able to get in that day. So it's just, and again, I like seeing you, but I like the other doctors as well. So that the goal is to build up, to try to build up a relationship with a primary doctor, but you can see the other doctors as well.
Well, certainly we cover for each other when we're on vacation or on our off days. So the doctors work either 3 days or 4 days a week. So there's a lot of coverage. So as you know, Blaine, I don't work Monday. So if you're sick, on a Monday, you're going to be seeing one of my colleagues. But what's nice is the team of docs that we've assembled, the 6 doctors, we're all very like-minded philosophically. Our practice styles are similar. I'd like to think that we're all kind and charismatic, and we share a lot of the same features. So it's not uncommon for my patients who see my colleagues in coverage to say, they were great, and I'm like, well, are you leaving me for them? No, you're great too, but I'm just telling you they're great. So I think we've got a great team, and it speaks to one of our key points in our culture is we're all about team-based care. We all look after each other's patients. We actually do something unique in that we rotate our medical assistants. So it isn't just one doc, one medical assistant. They rotate because we really want everybody to get to know all the patients, and the patients to get to know the different staff.
It's funny you said that because that's how you lost Cynthia as a patient. She liked you, but then she met with Dr. Polanski, and no offense, but that was cool. So I kept it in the practice. Talk a little bit, maybe I'll put you on the spot here, about vaccinations. And I want to talk about a couple of them off the top of my head. Let's start off with the flu vaccination. Okay.
Sure.
So I get a flu vaccination. What's your feeling on people getting flu vaccinations?
Yeah, no, sure. I think the most important thing is that folks who are at greatest risk of complications from influenza, they ought to be vaccinated. So we're talking about the older patients, pick an age, 65 and older, 50 and older, whatever that age is. And of course, the younger patients are the ones who are most affected by the flu. And then we think about people that are in risky jobs of exposure, people in healthcare, people in education. I tend to encourage folks to get the flu. And then the flu shot, rather. And finally, folks who have comorbid conditions. If you're diabetic, if you're asthmatic, if you have heart disease, those folks should really get the influenza vaccine. Now, when I have a patient who has no medical problems, who basically works from home, has very little exposure to other humans, and he says, Dr. Weizman, I don't think I need a flu shot. I don't hang around anybody. I don't argue with them, Blaine. I'm like, okay, you don't have to get a flu shot. I mean, we're not the type of practice that is really leaning on people to do things when it might not make sense. Now, that doesn't mean that the flu shot would harm them, but that's not the battle that I'm going to fight with that person. I would rather they have control over that decision.
It's funny you said that about the age being a factor. I had the same feeling, Dr. Weizman, when they had the COVID. It said only people who are over a certain age have to worry about this. I said, well, no deal. And then I realized I'm in that category. I didn't see myself as being
well, and as the history has shown us, that might have been the case with the Alpha strain, but now with the Delta strain, it doesn't seem to discriminate as much with age, and unfortunately, plenty of young people and middle-aged people have died or have gotten incredibly sick. So I think looking at COVID-19 as a virus versus influenza is very different as far as who is most vulnerable, and I think that's why you're seeing this wider push for COVID vaccination, including some of the mandates which have become quite controversial.
Well, the argument I always used to use, or I tell people, and I try not to argue with them anymore about this, but the flu vaccination as an example, and Cynthia had to take a while to convince her to get one, but I still think that people have died from the flu, but I know very few people, if any, have died from flu shot, and I think it's similar to my thinking on the COVID, that I guess some people have died from COVID shots, but I think the numbers are so minor compared to people who've had trouble not getting the shot. So just me.
No, I mean, I think you're quite right. And I think at this stage in the pandemic, most people have kind of are somewhat entrenched in their position, whether they're vaccine hesitant or they've been vaccinated. Maybe there's still opportunity to help some folks along if they're not quite ready for the vaccine. But yeah, of course, I think it's a numbers game, Blaine. And if you look at are there risks to vaccination to COVID? Of course there are. There's risks to everything. There's risks to taking Tylenol. You can die of water toxicity. I mean, there are risks to everything. But when you look at the risk benefits and you compare getting the infection to getting a vaccine, I think for the folks who have been vaccinated, I think the math is clear, and it's worth the minor risk of vaccination to protect yourself from this really nasty virus. I have loads of patients who are long haulers now. They're not back to work. They're still very sick, and it's tough on them. Not to mention the folks who unfortunately have passed away from the disease, which are many, as you know.
Talk about another vaccine. I didn't want to do the whole show on vaccines, but the one other that comes to mind that so many people don't know about is the shingles, the shot for shingles. Talk about what that is. And a lot of people, I guess, never even have shingles on the radar screen until it's too late, perhaps. What's shingles all about?
I think for those of us who have had chickenpox in our youth or at some point in our lives, essentially shingles is the reactivation of that varicella virus in a particular nerve root, and it presents with a very painful rash. And if you're lucky, the rash is minor and it goes away after a few weeks. If you're unlucky, you can be left with what's called post-herpetic neuralgia, and you could have pain for the rest of your life in that area, and it's miserable. Luckily, that's not very common. So the other tricky thing about shingles is the older you are, the worse your shingles is typically going to be. So every now and again, you'll see somebody in their 30s or 40s who gets shingles. It's generally a mild case. But I've had some patients in their 70s and 80s and 90s, when they get shingles, it's utterly miserable. And their pain often needs to be controlled with opiate medications, and it's very serious. So the vaccine, the original vaccine, the Zostavax, which came out years ago, turns out was only about 50% effective, unfortunately. So people would still get shingles even though they were vaccinated. The newer vaccine called Shingrix, which is a 2-shot series, has been out for at least 5 years now. It's about 92% effective at preventing shingles. It's indicated for anybody 50 years and older. So if any of your listeners are 50 and older and want to avoid getting a really painful rash, I would get the shingles vaccine. It's generally covered by insurance, so that's good. Yeah.
It used to be 60, right? And then they lowered it down to 50.
I think the initial one, we were meant to optimize, encourage people 65 and older, but I believe Zostavax was 55. We haven't used that one in so long. But yeah, Shingrix is now 50.
Talk about something else, Dr. Weizman, that's always impressed me about you personally and about your practice, but I guess you call it evidence-based medicine, or evidence-based practice. So, yeah. What is that?
Well, so I think for many years, medicine, you learn things in medical school, you get to practice things in residency, and then you're out in the world and you're kind of doing your thing. And there wasn't a lot of consistency. Different doctors did different things. And right around the time that I was in residency, 22, 23 years ago, they really started up with this notion of evidence-based medicine, that whatever we're doing ought to be based on the evidence. And there ought to be more standardization. How do we treat asthma? How do we treat diabetes? What's the algorithm as far as advancing medications and this kind of stuff? The argument against it is that, well, this is cookie cutter medicine. Doctors should have their flexibility. And so I think the key is finding a balance between using evidence-based medicine to guide how you approach a medical problem, but also not forgetting individualized, personalized medicine, knowing your patients well, knowing how sensitive they are to medicines, knowing their emotional sensibilities, et cetera. So I am not one of these people who says that evidence-based medicine should be more important than an individual's needs, but it has to be in the equation. I certainly can give you a few examples if you want of how we use that, but it's. Well,
I'll just ask you the one though, and again, you taught me this as well too. Remember when I first started going to you for the practice, you would tell me they should take a baby aspirin, and that was what was accepted at the time. And all of a sudden I came for one visit and he said I didn't have to take the baby aspirin anymore.
That's right.
Explain what happened on that.
Right. And so this is the thing about medicine, and it's frustrating for some patients, because I think there's a desire for medicine to be black and white and solid and always correct. But in fact, medicine isn't like that. We're constantly learning. And so there was a time when we thought that all menopausal women needed to be on estrogen. But then we had a really huge study that showed, well, in fact, only a few women ought to be. And for a lot of folks, it's dangerous. There's risks associated with it, right? So that was a moment, a watershed moment in medicine, where we had to admit as doctors that we got this wrong for years. But now we feel like we have a better understanding of postmenopausal hormone replacement therapy. Similarly with aspirin. For a time, we felt that taking a baby aspirin as primary prevention against heart attack and stroke made a lot of sense. Subsequent data sets have shown us that, in fact, for a lot of people, the risk of bleeding from that aspirin is greater than the benefits for primary prevention. And I need to differentiate that. Those folks who have already had some kind of vascular event, either a heart attack or a stroke or some kind of a peripheral vascular problem in their legs, they're put on aspirin to prevent a second event. So that's secondary prevention. Those folks still need to stay on their aspirin. And it's interesting, since this news just came out in the media, I've already had about 3 or 4 patients ask me, "Doc, should I keep taking my aspirin?" To which I say, yes, you actually are trying to prevent a second event. You must stay on your aspirin. So yes, I think the key is that data changes, and doctors have to pay attention along with their patients and make adjustments. And that's modern day medicine.
Talk about something else that I follow by going to your practice, and I'd like to get your reaction as for others. And that's the idea of the annual physical. How important is it, and should everybody getting an annual physical?
Right. So this is interesting, because when you think of an annual physical, Blaine, you and most other people, you're thinking of an actual physical examination. The doctor looks in your ears and your throat, listens to your heart, and so on. So interestingly enough, physical examination in well people does not have good evidence to support it. But what does have good evidence is every year going, depending on your age, certainly from 50 on, but I generally recommend annuals from 40 on, going through the various immunizations that would benefit you at your age, the various screenings, whether it be for colorectal cancer or for women with mammography and so on. What evidence-based screenings, vaccinations are recommended? What labs ought to be checked? And then most of us docs will do a physical examination during that annual wellness check, as it's termed, because every now and again you do pick things up, and it's good to get a sense of what normal is for a patient. And hey, I don't like the looks of that mole, Blaine. How long has that been there? So yeah, that's one of the areas, Blaine, where I disagree with evidence-based medicine. If I was to listen to evidence-based medicine, they would tell me not to do an annual physical examination when I do my wellness check. They would say, just focus on the preventative health measures, and that ought to be enough. But I think that's ridiculous. And I think the majority of doctors agree that there is benefit in laying hands on your patient and examining them once a year.
Well,
we do that.
Even the example of me, it's not that I'm embarrassed about it, but I saw you a couple of weeks ago, and I had some wax in my ear, and sure. I guess had I not come in, I wouldn't have picked it up, except when you were mates, I could even hear you.
That's right. Exactly.
But I'm saying that was helpful by coming in. I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't, checked it out at some point in time. Also, I remember I was talking a little bit about the idea that you don't do everything that you used to 10 years ago. I guess things change. And so I was disappointed several years ago. I was all set for my give a urine sample. You told me I wasn't going to give one that year. What was the deal on that?
No, I think, again, years ago, doing a routine urinalysis was normal. And then the evidence showed that it really wasn't worthwhile. You rarely pick up anything on urinalysis in someone who is not having symptoms. Now, that's very different than if somebody presents with urinary symptoms or pain in their back and you're worried about a kidney stone or infection and so on. You would check a urinalysis. So things are always changing. Another great example is pap smears. Pap smears used to be done on women from the age of 18 every single year. Now we know that that was overkill, and that in a good number of women, they only need a pap smear every 3 to 5 years. So things change, and yeah.
No, you should even mention too, as you mentioned off the air, that you would have still let me give a urine sample, but if I wanted to pay for it, that you'll give any test, I guess, if people are willing to pay for it. But
well, I mean, I think certainly one of the things that we do is we help our patients understand what their insurance companies will pay for, what they won't pay for. I mean, every now and again, I'll have a patient who says, "Doc, I'm finally coming in. I want you to run every test." And I'm like, well, it doesn't work that way. Actually, we only can run the evidence-based tests. Your insurance will pay for those, but everything else will have to be on your dime. And then they say, "Oh, well, let me rethink that then."
How about blood work? How important is it? So I go in, I'm not big, nobody's a fan of blood work, but I go in and once a year you do want me to do some basic blood work. How important is that, and what does that do?
Yeah, and I think it depends on your risk factors. I mean, if you were obese or you had other disease states, sometimes we do blood work, sometimes 3 or 4 times a year, depending on your medical condition. Certainly diabetics are familiar with getting blood work regularly. But for the generally healthy person after the age of 50, I think it makes perfect sense to just check a basic metabolic panel to look for blood sugar issues, kidney function, and so on, and a cholesterol panel. And then after a discussion with our male patients, we talk about prostate cancer screening with a PSA blood test. And that test has kind of fallen in and out of favor. So I think the PSA is a good example of where the doctor and patient need to have a conversation about the benefits of screening versus not. But I think routine blood work, once you hit a certain age, makes a lot of sense. It's relatively inexpensive, and it gives us a lot of good information.
How about a colonoscopy?
Right. So colonoscopy is fascinating because they just moved the goalposts on that. It used to be starting at age 50.
Yeah.
It's now starting at age 45. We've learned in the last 20 years or so that the incidence of colon cancer has trended younger in American population. So now when folks are coming in at their 45-year-old visit, I have to share the news that they don't have 5 more years. Now's a good time to get a colonoscopy to look for precancerous polyps to make sure you don't develop colon cancer.
Again, that's only needed if there's no symptoms every 10 years, right? Unless there's...
Yeah, if your colonoscopy comes out normal, then you go every 10 years. If they find something, generally the intervals are 3 to 5 to 7 years, depending on what they find.
Because again, to Dr. Belansky's credit, and you can mention it to her as well, that Cynthia, for some reason, was fighting getting that colonoscopy, and she kept putting it off. And my argument was the same thing too, that, nobody, it can be it's not a fun thing to do, but nobody dies from colonoscopies for the most part. But people, I guess when I saw the Katie Couric thing, years ago, that was the first time I realized that you should check this out. And he would still be with us, maybe her husband, right? Had he gotten a routine colonoscopy? So just something basic. Something else that you folks do too, and I'll let you, maybe we'll close on this question. But the idea being, you kind of do look at the whole story. So you have this whole series of questions you ask, and you even ask questions about, do I get my eyes checked? Do I go to the dermatologist? Do I do all these things? How important is that to factor in somebody's health?
Well, yeah, we ask people about their dental health all the time. Poor dental health has been linked to heart disease and even to dementia. So while it may seem odd to have your doctor ask you if you go to the dentist, that's the kind of question we ask as part of the annual wellness check. So,
it must be frustrating for you when people say no, or how do you deal with it when they say, they're afraid to go to the dentist?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's frustrating. I think we're beyond getting frustrated. We just try to work with our patients to help them optimize their health and share the data when there's data to share, and try to lead them on a good, healthy path.
Do you still have any patients who smoke?
We do have some patients who smoke. And for those who still smoke, I ask them, are they ready to quit? If they say no, I say, please reach out to me when you're ready to quit. And I will do everything in my power to help you quit.
God bless. Dr. Weizman, if folks want to get in touch with the practice or find out more about it, again, best bet is to do what?
Probably just check our Facebook page, the Our Family Doctor Facebook page. We try to keep up with that, and that's a good place to reach out to us.
Okay. Again, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Weizman, for being my guest this first half hour on the Blaine's World Show. Also for being my doctor since I moved to Asheville. I want to thank you for all the good work you do. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.
Speak to you soon. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
So as Dr. Weizman works his way out of the studio, Let me see if I can get him to disappear. If not, there he goes. I'll have our second guest come in if we can find her in a second. And there she is. And, hey, Babs, I'll be with you in 1 second. I should mention that as Babs gets all set up, I should mention that WPVM's mission is to foster our community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides a medium for artists, businesses, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. They can do so by going to the website, wpvmfm.org, and looking for the donate options in the upper right-hand side. It's next my pleasure to introduce my second guest of today's Blaine's World show, and she is Babs Mountjoy. And welcome aboard, Babs. You can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world. So if you're watching, that's Babs. And I should mention that Babs Mountjoy has been a published writer for more than 40 years. You started when you were 3 or 4? What was it? 5?
It's a little later than that, but thank you.
Okay. I love it. Your background, Babs, I got a big kick out of it. Working as a pizza maker, floral designer, journalist, and family law attorney. Currently a resident of Asheville, North Carolina. I love it too. The aging hippie. Loves her home in the Smoky Blue Mountains. She writes romance and such. I love this too. As suspense as Alana Lorenz, and sci-fi fantasy and paranormal mystery as Lindy Alexander. Is that correct? Two different names. Let me ask first of all. Your background just amazed me. I remember the first time I heard about it when I met you, maybe about a year ago. When you were a kid, where'd you grow
up? Cleveland, the east side of Cleveland, Ohio.
When you were a little girl growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, did you always know you wanted to be an author?
Yes.
Did you really?
I really did.
When did you decide that?
Oh, I was writing things, from by the time I was 6 or 7. When I was 9, I actually wrote a story, blow by blow, of how my cat ate a rabbit. And my mother made me take that to school, and the principal read it in front of everybody. So that was kind of bizarre. But
by the way, do you still have that story?
I don't. I bet it was great.
Oh no, we should rewrite it though, or introduce that in one of your other novels. What a great story! So 9, the first time you had to read something you wrote. What happened from then?
Then I pretty much took a lot of English classes. I took some creative writing classes, and then I got published the first time when I was 18, working for a newspaper, and went through college, and also studied English and writing, and didn't get published novel-wise until I was 43.
Wait, so your first thing that got published, you were 18. That's the first time you got paid as a writer?
Yes.
Do we still have that? I'm looking in the background. Do we still have it hanging from the wall? Your first check?
I do. I have it, but I don't have it hanging up.
Oh, is that cool? So 18, that's, you got the bug. So I actually paid you to write something. That's very impressive.
I was excited.
But then, so what happened? So then you started writing at 18, but all of a sudden, I guess, take a detour, and it's really cool. You became all these other kinds of things, including a pizza maker, but you also became a family law attorney. What drove you to do family law?
I don't know. Actually, I never wanted to be a lawyer. I mean, lawyers always seemed to me as kind of creepy people. But I was working as a journalist in South Florida, working at a Monday through Friday newspaper. And one of my mentors that helped me at the paper was a lawyer. And he said, you're really wasting your time here. You should go to law school. And I thought, boy, that's a long shot. So I was a single mother with 2 preschoolers. And I thought, well, fine, I'll apply and see if I get in. And I got in. And I was like, well, then I'll see if I get any financial aid. And then I got enough financial aid to go to school. And I thought, I guess I have to go now. So I did.
So how old were you when you became a lawyer?
I was 30.
Okay. And so what drove you into family law?
Nobody else wanted to do it because it's messy and emotional, and people call you at 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve night. And, But I had also been a child of divorce and I had been divorced. So I kind of knew a lot of the different sides about how that works. So I felt like I was, well experienced to help my clients.
And so then you did a large part of your adult life. You were a family lawyer, but you were
For
also
30, yeah, 30 years.
you were also writing at the same time.
I started writing about halfway through because clearly I was an idiot and didn't have enough to do with my day. But yeah, it was kind of nice to escape. My first several books were about divorce lawyers as heroines. There's a series called the Pittsburgh Lady Lawyers, as we lived in Pennsylvania then, and I said all the books in Pittsburgh, which is a great city. And each of the heroines of the story is a lawyer who works in the divorce field, and so um, they they have various adventures, and that was a lot of fun to do research, to hang out in Pittsburgh while I was there, and then also to sell the books.
How did you get the idea to write the stories? They just come to you, or how do you cultivate the ideas?
Yeah, they really do. I mean, I do write romance novels, and I've heard other romance novelists say, oh, well, it's just the formula. In the first 30 pages, you introduce your hero and heroine, and then they have an incident, and then they do this, and then by page 50, this happens, and by 75, this happens. And I just can't write that way. I mean, when I have a story, the story comes to me, and I think, wow, that would be a really fun story. And sometimes it's a romance, and sometimes it's aliens, and sometimes it's ghosts, and sometimes it's whatever it is.
Now,
And
as a
I
writer, I'm always amazed with what folks do. Do you write every single day, or do you get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and write for 2 hours? How do you approach writing?
I'm more a night owl writer. I actually belong to a group on Facebook called Night Owl Writers. And that's basically, it's kind of like after the household settled down, after the kids go to bed, after it's quiet. That's when most of us tend to get a little more inspired.
And so when you get inspired, again, at that point in time, even at night, do you set aside so many hours each night and write, or just whenever the mood hits you?
Somewhere in between that. I guess I know there are. I mean, Stephen King often talks about how he does. I'm going to write so many, 3 hours a day, 5 hours
Right.
a day, whatever. I don't do that. But I do. When I sit down and write, I basically write as long as it's going to take, and I try to get my butt in the chair every day. Some days it just doesn't happen, but yeah. But because well, that's for the writing part of it. What they don't tell you when you want to be an author is that's only half of your work. The other half is all marketing and promotion. And so, what you have to do on Facebook, what you have to do on Twitter, what you have to do when you write a blog, when you invite other people to be on your blog, when you go be on other people's blog, that's a huge amount of work that has nothing to do with creating the book.
Let's even talk Babs, about the third half. I love it. There are three halves,
Three
so you
halves.
talk two halves. But the third half also, which I want to ask you about, is the idea you also have to come up with the ideas for the stories, and how do you come up with ideas for stories?
Well, different things happen. Like for example, the one story happened when we had to take my ex-husband into the emergency room because we thought he was having an aneurysm. And while we were sitting there, um, we were watching the TV in the emergency room, waiting for the doctor to come back, waiting for the test to come back. And a show came on one of the Discovery type channels about a weird thing called the Montana Vortex, which has a paranormal site. The trees are all twisted. If you stand on one side of a room, you're only 4 feet tall. If you stand on the other side of the room, you look like you're 6 feet tall. It was just like this whole weird thing. So, we were stuck there for the whole night. So we were watching the show. And by the time we left, I had a whole paranormal investigator invented and half her story drafted out in outline what we were going to do with it. My ex-husband was fine. I mean, he just had a headache, and then he got some IV stuff, and he was fine. But that was how that idea came.
Now, how many books have you written?
I have 23 published so far. One's coming out in January, and another one will be out in May.
And so all the time, as you're finishing one, you kind of always working on something new? Like even now, are you working on something?
I am working on something. The first scene starts out where a woman who is a lawyer in Miami wakes up in the Everglades next to a burned car with a body in it, and she has no idea what happened.
Okay. And then we'll come up with an idea for another book about this woman being interviewed on a radio/Facebook live show. And we'll come up with a plot that, comes up with Blaine's World. You are on the show, and we'll try to come up with that for a theme on your next book in your spare
I think
time.
that would be great.
Okay.
That would be great.
But also what really impressed me with your writing is, as we indicated earlier, so you write under two names. What was the idea of having two names on your writing?
Well, when I started publishing, I was still practicing as a lawyer. And my first book was a book about elves living in the forest in Montana. So I thought, are people going to still take me seriously as a lawyer if I'm writing about elves in Montana under my own name? And I thought, well, let's not try that. So I took the name Lindy Alexander, and the science fiction and fantasy books that I was writing at the time came out under that name. And then what you want to do is you want to have a brand. So basically, I wouldn't really write romance novels under the same pseudonym, because people who pick up a Lindy Alexander book aren't going to be looking for a romance or romantic suspense. So then I picked a second name to do those books under, and that was Alana Lawrence.
How'd you come up with the names? Just on a
Just
whim?
did. Yeah, I looked through baby books, looked through different stuff, just things that would be interesting.
Now, you mentioned something interesting too. We were kidding about the three things a writer has to do, but you might mention about, the marketing promotional aspect of that. And that must have been somewhat of an eye-opener for you as well, because I guess you just wanted to write, and all of a sudden somebody told you had to sell the books as well.
Well, yeah, I think that happens to most authors. They're like, okay, I wrote the last page. I got my contract. I'm all set. Now the money will fly in. And it's like, no, actually it doesn't.
So talk a little bit about what that entails, if you could, with Babs, to market a book. What do you have to do?
Well, you can market in person. I mean, I love to be able to go out in person. Like, the last couple of years, conferences and live book signings have really kind of gone by the way because of COVID. So we're doing a lot of online marketing. I belong to several different marketing groups online, and we do trade a lot of publicity with each other. We appear in each other's newsletters. We appear in each other's blogs. We get marketing tips, how to do newsletters, how to do various things. We're always trying to get somebody's attention out there.
And when you try to get their attention, are you publishing your own books, or are you using a publisher, or using Amazon? What are you doing to get your books out?
All my books are published by small press. So I don't have any control over the publishing itself, but then I also don't have to do any of the work of, their typesetting and finding a cover artist and doing a lot of that. But because they are small press, a lot of them don't have a marketing department. If I was with Doubleday, I expect, they would have a display up at Barnes and Noble, and that would be great. But we're not there yet. Still working on it.
Okay, you get a major publisher, pick up one of your books.
Yeah, a major publisher will help you with marketing. Most of the small publishers will help you with, copies of art or maybe some review sites, but they really just don't have the staff to, support a full marketing drive. So it really falls all on the author.
What's your opinion about folks publishing their own books?
I know people who do publish their own books, and they do a great job, and they take it seriously. Their books are wonderful. What I don't always like is that there are thousands of other people who dash something down on paper, run over to, Amazon and upload it and say, here, I have a book. And although, we're all competing for the same readers. And so those of us who have gone through 4 layers of editing and, serious work to provide a good product are just as likely to get read as somebody who, has a book that hasn't been edited, the grammar's bad, the spelling's bad, the layout is crooked, and it's really difficult. But the especially after you've been published for a while, I know a number of authors are getting their back titles. After their contract runs, they get their rights back, and then they're self-publishing those books because then they get 70% of what they sell for, as opposed to 20 to 30%.
So is that something that you'll do as well? Like, do you have the rights to any of the books you've written already?
I got one back, and I was really kind of ambitious and going to try it, and then I found out how much work it was. And I got somebody else to do it for me. I sold it to somebody else instead. I just don't have the patience to figure all that out. Getting the writing and the marketing done is all I can manage.
How about the first time I met you at a session at a shopping mall? Do you like going out to do book signings and speaking to people one-to-one like that, or in small groups?
Do. It's great to connect to people who are reading, even if they're not reading my stuff, even if they don't want to buy a book from me. I mean, I have great conversations with people, who are just interested in books in general, or I don't know, are just interesting folks. It's not. I'm not usually a big people person, so as a writer, it gives me kind of a venue where I can go out and legitimately speak to people and they don't think I'm stalking them or something.
Well, it's interesting you said too, even with COVID and the whole bit, that I didn't realize that there was so much stuff you could be doing and have been doing in terms of online,
Yeah.
various Facebook groups. Is that helpful to an author?
It's really our main avenue at this point is to connect online somehow through ads or through other marketing techniques.
And that people, I guess, open up. You can meet total strangers, and they you can communicate with them that way.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of, Twitter, for example, is good for authors because agents will periodically put out a tweet that they're looking for a particular kind of book, and you can get picked up by an agent. There are readers who are out there, I'd really like a romantic suspense set in the Chesapeake Bay. And so they put that on Twitter, or they do a Twitter search, and, that information will come up for them. So I think, what we can get on social media is maybe not as personal as being able to sit at a table and sell books, but certainly at least it connects the reader and the writer.
You can also reach a lot more people quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Online. I was also impressed. I think that's where I met you the first time, to find out you wrote a book kind of involving autism. What was that book about?
The book is The Lost Chord, and it's by Lindy Alexander. It's about a young girl who travels between dimensions and meets up with some other people who are also traveling in dimensions, trying to solve an ancient mystery. And the way it came to me is I have 3 children who are on the spectrum. My youngest daughter is the model for B, who is the heroine of this story. And
that's the woman I met, I believe.
That's the one you met, yeah.
Right.
And yeah, she loves coming to book signings and doing the Vanna White thing, here's my mom and this is her book, and so it's so funny. But we would, as she was growing up, we would notice that, there were times that she just seemed to be somewhere else, as just part of her condition. But, the more I kind of thought of it in terms of writing a book, it just seemed that would be a great kind of a great metaphor is, how when she's not here paying attention to us, she's off doing something amazing.
Did you read the book?
She did not,
Okay.
but she's very excited about it though, because she knows it's about her.
Very exciting is right. What about another thing, I guess, in the back of your mind, to take these stories and have them developed ever for, if not a movie, a TV show or a special or something, or a film version? Have you ever thought about that?
Heck yeah. Where
Yeah.
are they? They can have them.
Yeah. But is that what, how does somebody get a book turned into a TV show, a film, a movie?
I would say if you have a regular literary agent, which I don't, I mean, they may have some Hollywood connections, but I think a lot of times it's just always who you know. If you know somebody who's in the industry, or if somebody who's in the industry reads a book and they really like it, or they hear about a book, it's a million to one chance that you can get hooked up with somebody. But I'm looking at the books that I have. I know that many of them, could be a lifetime movie of the week,
No,
those kind
it
of
sounds
things.
it.
And
Just
yeah,
listen to it. Also, talk a little bit about in terms of the movie of the week or just the settings of your stories. I know that a lot of them were based in Montana. Had you lived in Montana at some point in
I
time?
did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we lived in Montana back in the late 70s. And the Bitterroot Mountains are right there where Missoula is, and the Flathead Lake is north of there. And so I've said a number of the books in that area, which is really beautiful. I imagined that elves lived in the woods, kind of hidden from humans, and they had always been there. I haven't discovered whether the Blue Ridge Mountains hold elves or not. I guess that might be one of my next adventures.
Have you said anything in Asheville yet?
I did. I had a book that was set at Belshare. Of course, I think
Right.
the year after I was here to research that, they quit having Belshare. Uh, but yeah, it's a short romance about a girl who meets a guy and that's in a rock band at Belshare, and what happens in their love story.
Oh, great idea. But like I said, they don't have Belshare anymore. So
That's right.
we'll have to do something else. Do you have a preference as to what you write, romance or science fiction?
It's more of a mood thing, It's kind of if I'm feeling uh it's it's not really if I'm feeling like a love thing or an alien thing. It's more it's more, if I kind of go on things where I'm looking at edgy stuff, and when I'm feeling like I want to write edgy stuff, it's going to be our science fiction. And the romance stuff is more down to earth.
Now, have you ever combined the two? It'd be kind of an interesting thing, a romantic science fiction story.
Yes, there is a new category coming out called science fiction romance.
I love it.
Um, I have two books in that category. One is about a police investigator who gets turned into an alien lizard by some bad alien lizards, and the other one is just about a woman who is traveling with an alien companion, but they meet a human cowboy that they like, and then they kind of all start shipping out together.
Are there any books that you write that have a second book that follows it? You write the first one and you still want to develop the character or the concept further. Does anybody go into a follow-up book?
Yeah, the Clan Elves of the Bitterroot series is 4 books. I have a space opera group that has 3 books in it. The Horizon crossover series, and the Pittsburgh Lady Lawyer series has 3 books. But yeah, they don't follow the same. They don't follow the same characters. They all have different heroines.
Now, when you write a book, do any of them have the same heroine, or do any of them have it ends here and then goes into the second book and the third book? Have you done that at all yet?
Yeah, yeah. The series books have largely the same cast
Oh, they
at
do.
the end
Okay.
at when they get at the end of the first book.
Okay. When you write, do you see that as being part of the process that you're writing this and there's going to be a second or third follow-up book afterward?
I just taught a class this weekend online out of Montana, actually. And I was teaching a class on writing series. And my whole thing was, I'm going to tell you how to do it right because I didn't do it that way.
Oh, but
because there's really a plan you're supposed to use when you do a series. Like you start with overarching storylines and all this. And basically, I wrote one and I thought I was finished. And then 6 months later or so, I was like, oh, those people are still talking to me. I should write something else about that. And so they almost all the series kind of came one book at a time.
talk about what you just mentioned. So I didn't realize that in your quote spare time. So you also teach writing?
I do. This month actually, I had 3 classes.
Wow.
One on writing series, one on world building, and then I'm teaching a month-long class for my old pen writers group on writing science fiction and fantasy.
And where do you teach these courses? Online, obviously.
Online. Mm-hmm.
And again, how do people find out about them?
I do some advertising for them, and then the local conference will do advertising as well.
So let's talk about that. If folks want to find out more information just about any of these writing courses, how do they find? What's the best way to find it out?
Look online. There are so many courses all across the country that are great. There are great writing teachers. So I would say look online, find listing online for whatever kind of genre category you want to write. If you want to write literary or romance or science fiction or historical or whatever, and the classes will come up there, and look at reviews and talk to people who've taken the class and see if you think that you can join in and be happy there.
What if somebody wants to take a course with you? How do they find out more about Babs Mountjoy?
They could look on my website. I always have some, on there. I will be teaching a course at, coming up.
Okay, and your website is what, please?
I have one at lindyalexander.wordpress.com, and I have one at alana-lorenz.com.
Okay, I'll ask you to just repeat those again too. So your 2 websites are the first one?
lindyalexander.wordpress.com. That's my science fiction and fantasy website. And the romance and suspense website would be at alana-lorenz.com.
And that's LORENS, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And also, in addition to writing, teaching, you also are foster mom for
cats.
Talk a little bit about that.
Right.
How'd you get into that?
Well, one of the first things I found when I was here on Facebook is I would sign up on Wax, where it seems to be where everybody talks about everything, and found out that there were people who in town who are running foster cat organizations, and I had never heard of such a thing. The Humane Society was the first group that I fostered with. And basically what they do is they train you to take a group of kittens home and socialize them so that when you take them into the store for adoption, essentially, that, they like people and they purr and they are sweet and you want to take them home. Or if they have cats in their shelter that are sick and they want to get them out of for a while so that they can recover and not get all the other cats, dogs sick. We do that too.
And so you mentioned to me off there, I think you have how many cats now you're fostering?
I have 9.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all rescues. Yeah.
Will they stay? Now, the drawback to being a foster cat mom, I guess, is that will they eventually go, or are you going to wind up keeping all 9 of them?
These are the ones that have stayed here. I've fostered probably 100. And all the rest of them have moved on. I actually just got the last one about 3 weeks ago. She's 20 years old, and her human mom had to go into a nursing home, and they didn't want her to go to the shelter. So she came here instead, and I'm not sure she's happier because some of my cats are a little bit antsy, but she's adapting.
Anyway, I'd like to, thank you for doing that, Babs Mountjoy. Also, thank you for being my guest on the BLAINESWORLD show. tonight, as well as Dr. Michael Wiseman, my guest the first half hour, and to Amy Prisnash, my producer. Hope to see you next Wednesday here at the same time, same place on WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. And Babs, if you just stay with me as I say goodbye to everybody,
Sure. Thank you so much.
off the air. Thanks again.
Okay.